Welcome to TV Africa News and thank you for always joining us. This is Africa Today. My name is Najima Lima, but first are the headlines. Council tighter in shillings 2 billion land compensation scam, Kosase directs. Ministry of Education ready to effect the new cabinet directive on Swahili language. Sudan's civilian bloc rejects army offer and urges more protests. Patrick Kadu gift early among 8 players offloaded by KCC AFC ahead of new season. Welcome once again now the news in detail. The Committee on Commissions, Statutory Authorities and State Enterprises has directed the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development to cancel the certificate of title of the controversial 516 hectares of land in Kagadi district. We have more. The Accountability Committee chaired by Honorable Joel Senyonyi has been investigating allegations of fraud in the shillings 2 billion land compensation scam, where city law firm Lubegan Busibira Company advocates represented 79-year-old Natalia Namuli in the sale of 516 hectares of land. The money paid to the law firm is part of the controversial shillings 10.6 billion supplementary budget that the Lands Ministry requested for in the financial year 2020-2021 to pay land claimants in Buganda and Bunyoro sub-region. Kosase investigations recently unearthed a syndicated fraud where letters of administration and other documents in the names of Natalia Namuli were forged to process a land title for the said estate to effect the payment. A copy of the letter of administration bears the forged signature of the then Masindi resident judge, Justice Rafa Ochan, signed in 2015, yet he had resigned in 2013 to take up his new position as chairperson of the Public Service Commission. It later on emerged that Namuli, despite not being an administrator of the said estate, was stage managed and manipulated to sign documents she knew nothing about. During the Wednesday, 6th July 2022 meeting, Senyonyi directed that Mr. Baker Mugaino, the acting commissioner for land registration, commences the process of cancelling the land title in the names of Namuli because it was issued based on forgery. Apparently, it is due to this forgery that the Uganda Land Commission has not yet transferred the land title to its names. He further directed that the culprits involved in the fraud refund the money to the government. Leaders in Kampala are worried over the appalling state of public education facilities. Speaking during an engagement between the Kampala Capital City Authority leadership and its education partners, the leaders revealed that the majority of schools are still housed in colonial-era buildings, which poses a huge risk to the lives of learners and teachers. Now to go with more.
The engagement, organized by UNICEF alongside the Kampala Capital City Authority, aimed at identifying the challenges affecting the education service delivery and how best these challenges can be dealt with. During the meeting, leaders raised a number of concerns about the poor state of education service in the city. It was also depressing to learn that over 10 schools in the city are still roofed with asbestos despite the health risks associated with it.
So fenga ba policy makers, fenga ba planning ekibuga ekyo tutukwatako nnyo. Kubanga ffe tuwagira ebyenjigiriza ne bwewesanga abaana 30 ku 100 tebasobola kweyongera n'ebyenjigiriza n'ozaawo tulina okwekuba mu kifuba era ne central government gye tuludde nga tukaabirira tulowooza ke kaseera kino ekitreating nga priority.
World Health Organization research indicates that breathing in asbestos fibers may increase the risk of several serious diseases, including asbestosis and cancer. Despite the government move to establish state schools in all sub-counties across the country, here in Kampala, the plan is almost impossible due to lack of land. Kawempe Division has no single seat school, which has affected education service delivery in the area. Meanwhile, the KCC Executive Director Dorothy Chisaka noted that they are aware of these challenges and are trying their best to deal with them. However, she ruled that issues of underfunding remain a huge hindrance to improving the education service in the city.
And that's the reason we've invited you That is the reason we are seeking partnership. That is the reason we are yoking with all possible partners from the private sector, through PPs and every other way, so that we can realize these goals. I have to say how much we are grateful to government, because the government of Uganda has funded us significantly. I think, please, I want to ask you to clap for the government.
Statistics indicate that Kampala City has only about 70 public primary schools and only about 20 public secondary schools. Unfortunately, Kawempe Division has no public secondary school.
The Ministry of Education, together with the National Curriculum Development Center, have revealed that they are more than ready to implement the cabinet decision of having Swahili taught and examined as a compulsory subject in Uganda. Ahumza with more.
On Tuesday, Cabinet approved the adoption of Kiswahili as Uganda's second official language after English, in addition to teaching and examining it as a compulsory subject at various levels of academics. This, however, required the readiness of the various stakeholders, including the Ministry of Education and the National Curriculum Development Center. Speaking at Uganda Media Center in Kampala, Mugimba Dennis, the spokesperson for the Ministry of Education, said that they are more than prepared to having this decision effected as soon as possible.
As we come up with the roadmap, is readiness of all the institutions. It is not just about having public schools ready. We have to ensure that private schools are also ready. Being ready includes more than just having the curricula or syllabi and the textbooks, but you also have to have the teachers in place. So we have to do a baseline as part of our roadmap to ensure that the basic blocks for us to have Kiswahili as a compulsory subject are in place.
Mugimba, however, cited out some of the challenges during the process of implementing the adoption of Kiswahili, more especially on how to promote the language in the schools.
This has an implication also on government's resource envelope. It has an implication on private students who have to pay for unit fees, etc. So we have to look at the total picture of implementing Swahili as a compulsory subject. How do we promote use of Swahili in schools? Because if it's an official language, you made it a compulsory subject, you do not want children to learn the subject in class and not able to use it.
Mugimba further confirmed that all international students studying in Uganda will have to pay similar fees as native Ugandans without any form of discrimination across all schools, both public and private.
We have the curriculum for primary Swahili, and of course we have the curriculum for secondary, lower secondary, and even A-level. Children have been doing it as an option subject, so the syllabuses are there, and the teachers are there for Swahili, because there are a number of our higher institutions that have been producing teachers who have been going to teach this. We only now need to strengthen the implementation of it, since it is going to be compulsory now for senior 3 and senior 4, and probably A-level as pronounced by cabinet.
On the other hand, Dr. Baguma Grace from the National Curriculum Development Center said that they have all the materials required to have the language taught and examined as a compulsory subject in all schools across the nation.
Let's take a quick break. We will be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching TV Africa News, The Right to Know. Sudan's main civilian bloc, Forces for Freedom and Change, rejected a proposal by the country's coup leader to make way for a civilian government as a giant rests and urged more protests. The rejection was announced on Tuesday after a surprise move by the army on Monday to make room for the civilian groups to form a new transitional government. We have more on this report.
According to Omar El-Dege, executive of the civilian bloc of the Forces for Freedom and Change, the army chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan's speech was vague and full of double meanings after he said that he wanted the military to return to their barracks, but at the same time wanting to take the civilian power to the barracks, which is a way to reinforce his control even more than before. On the streets of Khartoum, protesters defied security forces and held firm on their makeshift barricades despite heavy fatalities last week. The FFC has so far refused to take part in talks with the military leaders, despite pressure from international brokers that range from the United Nations, the African Union, and regional bloc IGAD. Another demonstrator added that they have not been able to agree on this for 3 years, so why would they agree overnight or after 3 or 6 months, which is a way for Burhan to stay in power forever. Protests also spread to other cities on Tuesday, including Wad Madani, 200 kilometers south of the capital, where hundreds staged a sit-in according to witnesses.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, at least 27 million people are facing food insecurity, according to the United Nations. The UN predicts the situation is likely to worsen due to recent fighting between the M23 rebel group and the army in the east of the country that has displaced tens of thousands. Let's take a look. The region, which borders Rwanda, lives with a daily threat from dozens of armed groups that jostle for a piece of the region's rich mineral wealth, which the world mines for electric cars, laptops, and mobile phones. The crisis in DRC is considered the world's most neglected displacement situation, according to a report by the Norwegian Refugee Council. The country also experiences high rates of food insecurity, according to the FAO. The M23 offensive has had a major impact on civilians. Dozens have died, including children, and more than 170,000 displaced, according to the UN. The rebels have taken control of several villages, clashing with the government's army and increasing the already serious humanitarian crisis in the area. As the fighting continues and more areas are affected, the number of people fleeing rises every day. Around 500,000 could be considered to be in a vulnerable situation in that part of the country, according to the UN. Most of those who fled their villages now live in precarious conditions in churches or schools are transformed into shelters. Moving on, Algeria has marked 60 years of independence from France with a huge military parade, its first in decades, and a pardon of 14,000 prisoners. During the celebration on Tuesday, Algerian flags flew from buildings across the country and patriotic songs rang out from loudspeakers.
The North African country won its independence following a growing 8-year war, which ended with the signing in March 1962 of the Evian Accords. Warplanes whizzed overhead, just as armored vehicles rolled through central Algiers during the parade. Opposition figures and pro-democracy activists called the elaborate celebrations an effort to distract attention from Algeria's economic and political troubles by glorifying the army. Previously, presidents abandoned holding military parades, but President Abdelmadjid Tebboune revived the tradition for this anniversary for the first time in 38 years. He presided over the parade, hosting several foreign dignitaries including Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, Tunisia's Kais Saied, and Niger's Mohamed Bazoum. The government also commissioned a circle of 60 stars containing military figures and equipment to make a glorious history and a new era. Algeria's War of Independence left hundreds of thousands of dead, but 6 decades on, despite a string of gestures by French President Emmanuel Macron, France has rolled out any form of apology for the colonial period.
Away from that, the former president of Burkina Faso, Blaise Compaoré, who is in exile in Ivory Coast since his fall in 2014, is expected in Ouagadougou at the end of the week to meet with the military authorities resulting from the January coup. The former president of Burkina Faso, Blaise Compaoré, who was sentenced in absentia to life imprisonment in April by a military court in his country, is expected at the end of the week. He must arrive on Thursday or Friday for a short stay and be received by the head of state as part of the national reconciliation, according to a source close to the Burkinabe government. An emissary of the head of the military junta, author of the January 24th coup, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Damiba, met with him last week in Abidjan for his purpose, according to the source close to the power, which said that Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara had also received him. During his stay, he will reside in a state villa in which President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, who was overthrown in January, was placed under house arrest, according to the source. On social networks, supporters of the former president called for a rally at the Ouagadougou airport on Friday morning. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Santiago Damiba received former President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, whom he had overthrown at the end of June, to ease the situation. Let's once again take a quick break. We will be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching TV Africa News, the right to know. In our business news today, fuel prices soared in Ethiopia on Wednesday after the government reduced subsidies, adding to economic hardship for people already struggling with high inflation. There were long queues at petrol stations in the capital, Addis Ababa, with drivers reporting shortages as they try to fill up their tanks.
The price of petrol at the pump jumped almost 30% to 48.83 bill, while diesel went up almost 40% to 49.02 bill under the new price regime that will run to August 6th, according to the Trade Ministry. The federal government, which had almost hiked prices in May, plans to lift fuel subsidies progressively, according to the Addis 14 business newspaper. Prices of fuel, food and other basic goods have rocketed globally because of the Ukraine war, hitting vulnerable countries in Africa and elsewhere. The Trade Ministry said the cost of fuel for Ethiopian consumers should be almost double if it was calculated on current global prices. It said that considering the state of the country is in, the government is covering 75% of the price difference, while it was decided that the remaining 25% would be transferred to consumers.
In our health news today, around 2.3 billion people in the world, comprising of 29.3%, were moderately or severely food insecure in 2021, 350 million more compared to before the outbreak of the pandemic, according to a new United Nations report. We have more.
The number of people affected by hunger globally rose to as many as 828 million in 2021, an increase of about 46 million since 2020 and 150 million since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, according to a new United Nations report that provides fresh evidence that the world is moving further away from its goal of ending hunger, food insecurity and malnutrition in all its forms by 2030. The 2022 edition of the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World report presents updates on the food security and nutrition situation around the world, including the latest estimates of the cost and affordability of a healthy diet. It also examines ways governments can repurpose their current support to agriculture to help make healthy and nutritious food cheaper, mindful of the limited public resources available in many parts of the world. The report is a joint publication by the Food and Agriculture Organization, the International Fund for Agriculture Development, the UN Children's Fund, the UN World Food Programme, and the World Health Organization.
And in sports, KCCA-FC have announced that 8 players are excess baggage at Lugogo and have been shown the exit door. In a statement released on Wednesday evening, the club announced that Yesa Mugera, Gift Ali, Erisa Sechisambu, Patrick Kadu, Joseph Bukenya, Andrew Chigozi, Kasirie Davis, and Innocent Wafula will not be part of their set-up next season. Ahumuza reports.
The club stated that whereas some of the players' contracts were mutually terminated, others had expired at the end of the season and the club had opted not to renew them, whereas for others, extension options had not been triggered. Among those released is forward Patrick Kadu, who returned to the club in February as a free agent, who put pen to paper on a 6-month contract. He has, however, failed to reciprocate the earlier form during his first stint at the club that saw him score 32 goals in 64 outings for the Lugogo side and attracted suitors in form of Moroccan side RS Bakane that bought him in 2019. His return has not accrued any fruits for the Kasasiro boys. Others are Gift Ali, who a few years back was a pillar for the team, especially during the times of Mike Mutebi. However, injuries have seen the midfielder miss most of the last season under Molivier Kwaso at KCCA-FC, prompting the club to part ways with him.
That was the news. Thank you for always keeping it TV Africa. Please do stay tuned.